I'm Ashley Crowder. I am the co-founder and CEO of VNTANNA. I'm so excited. Today we have some amazing speakers from Google, Walmart, and Shopify, and we are going to be talking about how to implement 3D at scale for e-commerce. I'm going to let each panelist introduce themselves, and we all have a few examples to share because 3D is super visual. I'm the co-founder of VNTANNA, and we're really trying to make 3D as fast and easy as possible. 3D is really no longer an option. It's driving serious ROI. We've seen studies that having 3D on your website doubles conversion rate and increases cart size by 61%. We're trying to make this as easy as possible so you can upload any existing design files, and our patented optimization automatically optimizes and converts that file so that it can load really fast and you can use it everywhere. So once it's on our platform, you can easily copy an iframe and embed it on a website. And then AR is built into it as well. So you don't have to do a bunch of custom development. All of the social platforms are also have invested billions in the ability to be able to use 3D. And I'm sure many of you have seen Snapchat's recent study where doing these types of shoe try-on experiences have increased conversions by 94%, which is massive. So one of the things we do with our optimization is we automatically provide files that will actually work in the social platforms, because often they have to be less than 4 megabytes or smaller. And then it's not just B2C. We're actually seeing a lot of clients use 3D for B2B sales, which is great. They're just completely replacing physical prototypes with digital, which is saving them thousands of dollars, reducing carbon footprint, and increasing speed to market. So I'm obviously very excited about everything happening in 3D, but I will pass it over to Ipshita.
Thank you, Ashley. And hi, everyone. My name is Ipshita, and I lead partnerships and go-to-market for 3D ads and other emerging consumer experiences at Google. I've been at Google for 8 years now, and I'm based in New York, and I've been part of the 3D and ER space for a few years now. I also have a few examples to share. The first example really was when we enabled a popular French brand to tackle their challenge of really showcasing their ingredients of products. So when we worked with them, what they told us was, hey, we need a good way to help our consumers visualize the ingredients in our perfume bottles. So what we recommended to them at that time was, why don't you showcase your product in 3D? That way users can really rotate the bottle, look at all of those different ingredients in 3D and really have a great picture of what your product is all about, what that quality is about, what the ingredients are about. So we released this case study last year. So it really helped users visualize the product, as well as drove some of those brand engagement metrics. So for example, from this particular example, users saw 3x higher engagement, and they also saw an increase in exposure time. And another great example is trying on makeup. How cool would it be if users could really try the makeup on their faces without actually going to a physical store, like a Sephora, and trying on all of these different beauty products? And we enable some brands to do exactly that. Now users can actually go to Google search and try on these visual experiences in AR. So these are just two examples of the potential and value of 3D and AR. And I'm really excited to dive deeper and share more examples, case studies, as well as our experiences. I'll stop sharing now, and I will pass it on to Cynthia.
Thank you, Ipshita. I will share my screen as well. I am Cynthia Maller. I am head of CGI at Walmart, and we have some other brands too where I look after that, which is art.com, Hey Needle, and Allswell. So all of those are rooted in the home space, which is a good thing to note about case studies. I always want to root myself and everybody else in what is the goal of content, because after all, the goal of content is never going to change. I look at it as avoiding deception. And so internally, when you want to talk about a new technology, you always want to just root it in the customer's point of view and what it is the brand is going to promise. So with retail, I think one of the biggest things is when it shows up, I want it to be what it is you showed me, right? So when we talk about CGI and 3D, there's various levels of fidelity, but really what it's all about is that, like, I want to trust you that what you showed me is what I'm going to get. And that's as old as time with retail, right? And that's a 3D model, of course. So with my job, it's not always so much about the customer adoption in the larger world, because that is happening. Really, with Walmart, scale is the thing. Whether it's evangelizing, in my job, I want to reach everybody in the company, and I have to understand that that's a large scale, or whether it's asset production, whether it's organizing your thoughts behind how we're going to fund this. It depends on how your business is structured, but very often in retail, it can be very vertically oriented. So in terms of scaling, you want to think about that lateral support on every level. So then just in general, I always want to say, well, let me go back and really understand what it was like before I knew anything about this, and always come from that point of view, not speaking down to anybody, but just remembering that those of us in this space, we're almost years ahead in what we're thinking when we're talking about something. And that's when you want to gain support in a company. I think really any size company, you really want to gain support for the long-term funding and the long-term operational view, because that really is going to set you up for success for however those assets are used. So one thing I talk about in terms of scale is, we have a lot of photo studios. I've run some of them. And, one of the things we do is, of course, we do beautiful imagery and we build beautiful sets. Our set builders and our stylists are just amazing. But I always say, imagine if you never had to strike that set and you could redress it every time you had a new campaign or a new area of focus. So that's language that is not technical. That is something that people can understand. So when I show examples like this, then they start to think about applications for their own vertical or whatever it is they're doing. And the longevity of the investment is important. And the other thing is, all of us in retail, if it's a physical good that we're selling, there are endemic problems to creating content, especially visual content. Samples show up and maybe they're broken, they're missing parts, or maybe you just would like to show the whole collection rather than having to curate 7 pieces and just photograph that one tableau. Again, when I talk about value at scale, I can talk to merchants about those things. You're not limited by the sample problems that we've all had for years and years and years. And then by doing that, you have the opportunity to test if you want to test. You have those assets at the ready, and then you can react in real time. Again, rooting it in what the merchant's point of view is when they're at work. Something goes out of stock, something ends up having terrible reviews. You want to switch that out. But again, if you've struck that set, you're out of luck. And now you have issues with trust and people calling customer service, and right. So this helps with brand trust. And then, with my job, I always want to talk about a shared library. It takes some education about, well, what does that mean? And rooting it in real world analog. I said, imagine if we had unlimited real estate budget and we could build and own like hundreds of houses and continue to like empty it out, redecorate it, and the structure is the same. So I know that people who listening in, they know this, but I think, in terms of gaining support in your own company and starting this operationally, you do need to root it for people in something they really understand outside of the technology. So these are some examples of work that we've done where I was able to repurpose a structure that might have been done a year ago, maybe last week, but bring that structure back and completely redress it to sell something different, maybe even a different vertical. And this is very powerful from an operational standpoint. You got to be able to share this library, because again, if you're vertically oriented, you're just going to be really inefficient. In fact, there's been cases where different teams have modeled the same product. So getting people talking to one another on a lateral level is not easy to achieve, but if you can unite people around the idea of efficiency and that shared library, meaning everything that you create, again, you never have to strike the set, and you can be a real estate magnate and own like thousands of houses. And then finally, I want to talk about the value of CGI and 3D. It's not a fair fight with photography. I think I've talked about this before, that the other problem is that is the only bar that content creators have, is photography. But there are many differences that you have to overcome in some sense, which is, and I deal with this, when you're creating imagery, the sky is the limit. You can have anything you want. All of these rooms don't exist. I just played, designer, and like, I'd like to have this kind of couch or, this kind of plant. And as you know, but then when you bring in your creatives who currently create imagery, they start to feel the pain of, well, on set, a lot of sentences start with, well, on set, we could move that plant around, we could do this. So in terms of scaling, you also have to scale the state of mind from your creative folks, because there are some things that they can't do or that they have to adjust how they do it. And it's somewhat painful, but when you get the results that you get, then people feel really proud of their work, and the story about how you got there isn't as painful. But in terms of CGI, art.com is one of our acquisitions, and they have a wonderful business. And obviously artwork varies, and used to be that they just rented one house per catalog season, and they got what they got. If you had a mid-century modern curation, it may be hard to get that room to look a certain way. Well, this was not an easy sell, but the folks at art.com really were brave to go ahead and step into 100% CGI, especially for a printed product. But what we talked about is the merchants and the curators, we could do justice to every single unique curation. We weren't limited to a certain type of room, time of day, season, anything. So this is really a great use case. And it's, everyone's job becomes almost more fun, because they know that however they're curating, they don't have to think about, well, what kind of house are we renting? And, oh, I don't know if we could do the particular collection because, we're in a log cabin this year. So it's probably no surprise, again, that there's an economy of scale, but it's not just about saving money. It's like, what happens because you're saving money? And in the case of art.com, and as we roll it out in the case of any vertical, any curation, and the mindset of every merchant, is we can do justice to that particular story every single time. The environment, the styling, again, the structure of what you're showing, even if it's just a countertop and you're just showing a blender, you can think about what kind of kitchen it is. So I bring this up because when we talk about value at scale, the word value is so many things. It's emotion, it is finance, of course. It's also just collaboration. I've been able to scale the idea of collaboration in the company, which used to be a much, more like a group of colleagues, and now it's much, much larger. So I think with CGI, there's a lot of value that you can communicate in old school terms with old school metaphors and get the support to move forward.
Thanks so much, Cynthia. Now we've got John from Shopify.
Thanks, Ashley. So Shopify is a omni-channel commerce platform. We host over 1.7 million businesses on Shopify. Those businesses use Shopify to start their business, to sell, to market, and manage their business, both their online site and their email campaigns, as well as many sales and marketing channels. We believe in the power of 3D and AR, and that it will be a important part of the future, a common part of the future. And so last year, we baked 3D right into the platform. And so the same way that our merchants can add images and videos to products, they're now able to drag and drop 3D models directly onto their products. And out of the box, this gives an experience where visitors to their site can spin a model in 3D directly on the page. as well as launch into an AR mode on iOS and Android devices where they can see products directly in the real world in their space or out in the world. As others have mentioned, this leads to great conversions. We did a study last year where we compared products that have AR or 3D to those that only have images, and we saw that there was a 94% conversion lift on those that had 3D and AR. And so we're excited to bring this to more merchants and to grow. We also have a really strong partner network. So if these out-of-the-box experiences do well for you, you want to grow, we have partners that can help you do everything from get those 3D models in the first place of your products to doing things like building a custom configurator just for your site that uses the power of 3D, or special AR experiences that are unique to you. And so we also have a partner network that takes these capabilities and extends them beyond what comes out of the box so that our merchant needs in AR and 3D are met.
Awesome. We're one of your partners. We love working with you
Yes.
guys. So awesome. Well, yeah. And of course, between Google and Walmart and Shopify, you guys are the definition of scale, right? It's one thing if you're creating one 3D, experience, or maybe even for 5 products, but when you're talking about thousands, it has to scale up. So, Cynthia, going back to you, how are brands, expediting the adoption of 3D? Are they hiring internal teams? Are they using external agencies? How is Walmart doing this?
It's a great question. So I always do, because I have an operational focus, as you have to have before you ever get out and do the awesome things that that Shopify and Google are doing. So the rapid adoption starts internally. I think we can talk a lot. I mean, Shopify has been a great partner in terms of how can we talk about what happens when this gets in front of customers. But there is a huge gap that you want to bridge for people. And I think that the customers are out there, the amazing platforms are out there. And I think partners have a role to play in a couple ways. They've often got the technology underpinnings already built. And the other thing is they have their eye on what's going on. They have the finger on the pulse. I mean, we're doing different things day to day, and we can't possibly do that. So we really have to count on partners to make sure we understand what the latest thing is that's helping conversion. And then internally, we're not going to be ready for that unless we can organize behind those assets and all the things that come with that. So I kind of look at it as, the people are out there waiting. And they have a certain level of tolerance as they're waiting in line. We don't want it to be like the DMV. We want it to be something much faster and much more efficient. So I believe that we don't have to try to get more customers. We have to make sure that we're playing in that field so that actually it's seamless. When people go from one retailer to the next, it should just feel exactly like they want it to feel. So you don't want to be that retailer that's stuck in the past. So how we're doing it is making sure that we are ready internally to produce at scale so that we can match whatever customers are going to ask for. And that's no small feat, but I do give us a lot of credit for saying to ourselves, okay, internally with people, this is what we need to do at scale. This we can do. These are the things that we can't do as quickly as we need to do. And then we also want partners who bring us vision and bring us even problems that they're noticing, not just cool ideas. So it is definitely a partnership. I don't see that ever changing just because, no one wants to have the hubris that everything that's going on. Walmart very much relies on customers always to lead the way. They lead the way for us in everything. So this is no different. We want to know what they want, and then we want to make sure that it's in stock, right? So there's no difference between a product being on a shelf and an experience being there to grab. So yeah, that's how we're doing it.
That makes a lot of sense. And I know we've talked a lot about, especially an organization as big as Walmart or others, just connecting the dots internally. Cynthia, you go and hunt down and find people and be like, well, you can use this asset. We have, because I know I've had conversations with brands, even like Lexus, I'm talking to the sales and marketing team who's like, we don't have 3D assets. I'm like, you definitely have 3D assets.
Right.
you know. So that kind of leads me to my next question, and I'll kind of throw it over to John, but everybody, feel free. What do you need to get started? Like, how do people, if you're a Shopify business, like, how could you start?
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one thing is you need that 3D model of your product, right? That's the core, and from there, thankfully, those assets are reusable. So there is a difference between, say, the 3D model you might use in the catalog photography that Cynthia showed off, and what you want to use in real time. There are different envelopes of performance you need to match, but thankfully there are a lot of tools out there that will let you transition along that spectrum. And so just getting a good model of your product that looks realistic and you're happy with is that key starting point. And as I showed earlier, at least with our platform, you can just get started with that. You can upload that and you'll get a basic viewer on the web and some AR functionality, and that's great. Like that provides that power for those statistics that I talked about. But from there in the future, if you want to build custom configurators, if you want to start building advanced experiences in the future in AR and VR, where you might have multiple products in a laid out room or something like that, it's all going to be that same content that starts and builds from there, right? And sort of to answer a bit of your previous question as well, most of the brands we see, big and small, on our platform are reaching out to partners to do that work. For a lot of folks, it is early days for AR and 3D. They want to make sure that return on investment is there for them. And so they're not yet ready to hire internal capabilities, or maybe it's just not the way they run their business. We have many businesses on our platform that have millions in revenue, but have somewhat small staffs compared to, maybe 10 people working for them. Whereas in the past, that would be unheard of to have that level of revenue with such a small staff. But that's sort of what the web has enabled people to do. And so those folks will reach out to agencies who are, experts at creating 3D content to get that content made, or to look for advice on how to take the experience and bring it to the next level for their brand. So definitely the first thing to do is go get a model of your product, run some experiments with that, see how it engages your audience, and from there you can grow in your own unique way in dealing with 3D and AR.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm all about, like, just get one and start and experiment and don't be afraid. Just like you A/B test other content, you should be A/B testing the stuff. And sorry, Ipshita, you were going to say something?
Yeah, and absolutely. Just to add to that, I think the first step is to really identify which products are a good fit for 3D. So for example, a product like a shoe is a really good candidate because a customer user can check out the different textures, for example, leather versus canvas, and they can also view the product in different colors. And then just looking at it from a user perspective, why does it add value for customers? So for example, a customer may really want to check out a car in their driveway, which is possible with AR and 3D, and not really go into the dealership until they've made up their mind. And I think what we are also noticing is a lot of brands want to adopt 3D and AR tech, but just need a little push in the right direction. So a number of times, brands do work with external agencies to build all of these 3D models for requirements. So that's definitely an easier and a more straightforward way. But longer term, though, I think there is significant value in brands really training their creative teams or maybe hiring 3D developers. But again, it's a longer versus shorter strategy.
For sure. And at VNTANNA, we work with like a lot of apparel companies specifically. And the bigger ones have definitely started designing in 3D using programs like Browseware or Clo. And those are great companies. They both provide a lot of training resources because at the end of the day, these are pattern makers and fashion designers who are learning 3D. They're not 3D artists, but a lot of companies have done a really great job of training up their staff. And, a lot of it was forced because of COVID. It was like, oh my gosh, we need 3D models now. We don't have samples.
I would love to add to that. I'm trying to encourage people, like you were saying, some things render well in 3D and other things, it may not look as good, or you may say, well, why do I need, a can of Coke in 3D? So when it comes to content creation, it is a mind shift with creatives. Like in the scene behind me, there might have been things that if you were bringing them onto a set would be a no-brainer. But training people to think about modeling and think about what model and what renders just wonderfully and what might be a challenge. Then you talk about, styling and curating in just a little bit different of a way. That way you get a better result. On the other hand, I do want to model that can of Coke because I might want to have it on the counter. And I want to get people out of the habit of thinking that this is a composite like Game of Thrones. So I think it just depends on what the goal is, but I agree with you that you just have to think, now you have to think like a sculptor and not like a sketch artist. So,
yeah, no, for sure. Because yeah, some things, 3D enables so much, but some things just aren't quite possible yet, right? So there are those limitations. Well, Ipshita, going to you, how do we make 3D accessible to the masses? I know this is something Google's really been working on.
Yeah, I think from a brand perspective, I think awareness of what 3D can do for the business, how it can really add value, will go a long way in helping the brands make that decision to invest in building 3D models. So today there's a lot of research out there which calls out all of these brand equity metrics uplift. And there are easier tools or tech to create these 3D models. So I think from an ecosystem adoption perspective, there are these different tools. I think collectively we want the adoption to 3D to become as prevalent as, let's say, standard images. So I think John mentioned this, but Google also has a partner network which can be leveraged by brands. And when it comes to training, I think the best way to leverage 3D resources is just leverage the tools out there. So for example, from Google, we have built these 3D templates in a tool called Google Web Designer. And Google Web Designer is an externally available tool. And it's today being used to build these standard banner ads. And we have made sure that 3D is also a component of that tool. Then again, simple things like video tutorials on Google's Help Center pages. We try and do our best to make sure that the information is out there, that partners, brands are able to access it easily and to look at the content, go through it. I think that's the best way. Just a lot of awareness around the existing tools, making sure the onboarding process is as simple as possible for both partners and brands really has been our endeavor.
Yeah, I would second that. I think that onboarding ramp is going to be very important. And it's something that the partners who provide the services are going to have to work hard at. If you think about something like video, video also has a lot of technical difficulties to it under the hood. Like if you really want to tweak it, there's video codecs, and each of those video codecs has all these different parameters you can tweak to get different bit rates and frame spacing and all these things. And so if you're really going to provide the best quality video, you have to play with all those things. But most people in the world don't have to bother with that. We've built layers of tooling. Our experts know what the right level to communicate with their customers is to get, what's the desired outcome you want. We'll take care of all that technical stuff behind the scenes. But I think 3D and AR are both so early that a lot of that technical domain expertise, a lot of that technical language is still seeping into the conversation. And quite frankly, it overwhelms the merchants in commerce that are trying to adopt 3D, right? So we're gonna have to find that language balance where we make the concepts accessible. We make it easy for merchants and the people building things for them to have a common language so that if the merchant wants a tweak to the 3D model or to the 3D experience, they know what words to say and they're able to quickly point at what they want changed and how they want it changed. And so that's going to be an evolutionary process for the entire ecosystem to work at. But it's something that has certainly been a challenge thus far, is trying to make sure that people aren't overwhelmed and intimidated by the domain.
Hear, hear.
Yeah, I've used Google Designer. It's great. I also love that, Spark AR with Facebook and Instagram is almost identical to Lens Studio for Snapchat. So if you learn one, you can kind of learn the other, which is nice. So yeah, we've talked a lot about the positives and all the great things. I mean, what are some pitfalls, you all have seen with implementing 3D? Cynthia, you've been working this long time. What are some don'ts or things to avoid?
Well, I look at it a little bit like building a brand. I think there's an order of steps that you should go in, and it's not as fun to start at 1, 2, and 3. In other words, like we were talking about, what products should we do in 3D models? Why? And your partners can help you answer that question. But then how do we do that? Because You know, there's like simple things like shared library, what's the CMS, what's the DAM, who has what and where. That can get overwhelming, but it you know, got to solve that problem first. Or even when you start to work with a partner, they're going to be like, where are your files? I don't, can you help me here? And other parts of the company are going to be wondering where things are. So pitfall would be, you know, getting sparkly eyed and romanced by the end product and then forgetting that there are just some practical things that you've got to do to be ready for the next step. And then, you know, I mean, psychologically, there's a lot of pitfalls. People get very scared that they aren't going to be brought along for the journey. They're not, they need to learn some software. You know, John brought up, like, I don't understand what you're talking about, but I don't want to say that I don't understand it. So also building that emotional intelligence throughout the organization, that it's okay. You don't have to be technical. You just, in fact, what you want, your goal stays the same. Okay, you want to engage, increase conversion, build brand trust. And so a pitfall would also be, as technologists, just kind of like, you know, running and leaving people behind that just can't catch up or think fast enough. That's just a horrible thing to do. And you need these people. We need our merchants because they're great at what they do. And when we look at this correctly, their wheels start spinning in their area of expertise that I could never think of ideas that they do. So starting at the beginning and taking into account that we're human beings and we have fear. There's a lot of fear with technology. That is just never going to change. It's always been that way. So slow down and be empathetic.
I want to second that. Like, I think maybe, hopefully this is a somewhat accurate summary, Cynthia, but I think a lot of people build these experiences as a standalone thing, right? Let's try this experiment around 3D and AR. But if you're really going to embrace it, you have to think of it through your product development cycle, right? So when you start planning your new product lines, at the same time you would start planning your other assets like images and video, you have to start thinking, well, are we going to do something here with 3D and AR? How are we going to leverage those other assets we're making, like images and video, or just the process that takes place to do that, to get 3D and AR. And the businesses on Shopify that are the most successful certainly do that, right? They start thinking about it from the get-go, and every, you know, seasonal release of products or whatever they have, you'll see 3D come along for the ride. So I think that's one thing that's really important. I think the second one is about how you present 3D and AR on, say, your website. So, you know, we've seen a lot of times, like something like Apple's Quick Look, for as good as it is, you know, they give you this little glyph in the corner that's an icon that doesn't really describe what it's going to do for you, right? And so we often, in our themes, the way we build it is it's a more specific call out, a button that says something like view in your space, right? Where it tells the buyer like what's going to happen here, or, you know, even Apple does this themselves at the bottom of their product pages. Hey, see what this laptop looks like in your home, right? You need to be more explicit about calling out the experience that a buyer is going to interact with. And so, you know, one of the things I see is the experience is either too buried in that it's, you know, way deep in your gallery or way down at the bottom of the page. And then when you finally get there, there's, you know, some logo that someone who's into AR might recognize, but your average consumer won't, right? So make sure it's really salient to people that there's this cool experience here on the page or in your app to be had, and let them embrace it.
Yeah, no one knows what that cube is outside of the industry, for sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. Oh, sorry, Akshita?
And I was just going to agree and say that vision is really important, right? Like, if you think about the vision, long-term vision of what it really means for your end consumers, I think that would make a lot of sense and really open up the opportunity to not just test for maybe a month, but make it a longer plan of the marketing cycle. And just to deep dive a little bit into a nuance of on the tech side. So photorealism is definitely possible with 3D, but there's always this trade-off between fidelity of 3D models and file size. So for example, interiors of a car, it's definitely possible to show interiors of a car in 3D, but that will significantly increase the file size. And we typically recommend staying within a certain file size because it impacts page load time. So things like that are also pitfalls in a way, because sometimes there are lots of expectations with immersive experiences, but then at the end of the day, there are always these trade-offs to consider.
Yeah, I mean, at VNTANNA, we are trying our hardest to shrink those file sizes with no visual difference. But if anyone wants to test and give me feedback, that it's always welcome. But yeah, and I think the one thing, just to reiterate, I think all of you said a little differently, was just making sure your organization is ready and that you have a plate, you're set up so your design team knows what your sales and marketing team is doing, and you can have this single source of truth 3D file that's used, across the organization. It's great.
But don't make that scary, right? Like, it kind of goes back to something we said earlier. You can start small. It doesn't take weeks of learning for all those different folks in your organization to understand the value and to agree on, like, let's start small. Let's take our top selling products, get a model. Here's how we'll integrate it. Let's see what happens. Yeah. Okay, how do we do this a second and a third time with a slightly bigger part of our catalog, and then move forward? For
sure. Great. And there's a lot of organizations out there that can help. So Ipshita, I know you're on the board of AIB that's doing a lot to educate the industry. Can you tell us more about that group?
Yeah, so IAB is actually a great partner in bringing stakeholders together who are involved in the AR 3D space like us. And the purpose really is to talk about AR, share best practices, and really help support the 3D AR ecosystem by thinking through challenges and also thinking through collectively how we could solve for some of these industry level topics. A good example is recently IAB released a comprehensive buyer's guide, which lists out all of the different solutions available at an industry level for brands to think about and integrate it in their marketing plans.
Yeah, that buyer's guide was great because it really gave some statistics of like why AR is so powerful and how to use it. And then I know on the more technical side, John and I are both part of the Chronos group, which is pushing for standards in 3D. And Cynthia, you were like the pre-Chronos group, you and John. I don't. You can tell more about it.
It was a wonderful thing. And actually Google brought us all together, and it was actually kind of fun because in a room, there were 50 of us, and in a room you had like representatives, mostly from the home space. You had Target, Williams-Sonoma, Walmart, Lowe's, IKEA. And so it was actually this really, like, lunch break was really interesting. Like, nobody wanted to talk, but everybody wanted to talk. And it's like every answer you gave was a little bit like smushy. But in any case, the goal of the day was to create the PNG of the industry. And I don't want to diss Flash, because at the time it was wonderful. But what happened was the standards on not with that file, but on the receiving end, the standards weren't there. And as we all know, you would get to a particular place and you had to download a plugin. And we just don't want that to happen. So to have those standards means everything for the customer. I know lots of people know about Keynote versus PowerPoint. I mean, we got to remember there was a time when you either did one or the other. And if you wanted to send it around, you had to convert it. So the goal of that day was, let's get ahead of this and admit that there have been times when it goes wrong, and let's not let that happen. And I thought it was just an amazing thing, because it's true. This is exploding. And so in terms of partners, oftentimes you have a proprietary repository that's part of the SaaS relationship. And there's a lot of things like that go on. So we just wanted to align on file format. And Unity and Chronos were there and raised their hand to help and actually add to the software some things that the retailers needed. Folks like Shopify were there to support us with what we might need, from a dissemination standpoint. I don't know, I think it's going to be very meaningful, and it will be the results will be invisible, which is perfect. Yeah,
the Chronos group has been great. So Chronos is a royalty-free IP organization. So they release open standards. Often in the past, it's been around things like OpenGL, WebGL, Vulkan, these APIs that you put any graphics card in your computer and make sure your video games and things will run, or that every website can do 3D. For commerce, there's two groups that are the primary focus. One is 3D formats. They own the GLTF file format, which kind of has become the PNG or the 3D of the web. It's what we support at Shopify, and I know many others do as well, like Google. And as well, the 3D commerce group really takes a 3D lens on the problem space of 3D for retailers. And it is a great mix. We have the retailers Cynthia mentioned, but we also have platforms. So ourselves, Facebook, Google, Amazon, and then we have some of the tool vendors, so the Autodesks, the Adobes, and so we get the whole ecosystem playing their part, both big and small companies. And so there'll be a number of standards that will come out, both from that 3D formats group and 3D commerce, that will hopefully, as Cynthia says, make things invisible and just work, make it easier for merchants, make it easier for partners, make it easier for platforms.
Yeah, and I even as a startup, being a part of it has been great, because it really helps. You guys are solving all these problems, so we're going to keep focusing here, right? Like, I don't want to reinvent the wheel if this is coming out, which has been great. Well, this was super interesting. Thank you all so much for your time. I hope this was helpful for everybody listening on how to get started or how to scale up what they've already started. And we'll be around for some questions. So thank you.